Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is regarding the impact in Scotland of the reported plans of the UK Government to grant up to 130 new oil and gas exploration licences.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Oil and gas exploration and production, including licensing, remains reserved to the UK Government. The Scottish Government is clear. Unlimited extraction of fossil fuels is not consistent with our climate obligations if we are to meet our target of 1.5 degrees under the Paris Agreement, and it is not the right solution to the real cost of living crisis families are facing. Instead of licensing more fossil fuel extraction, the UK Government should be encouraging investment in renewables and supporting a just transition for our energy sector, Scottish households and businesses.
Mark Ruskell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. In her first weeks in Downing Street, Liz Truss has taken a wrecking ball to climate commitments. The UK Government is once again pretending that they can drill their way out of the energy crisis while the world is facing unimaginable suffering from climate breakdown. From installing a fossil fuel fanatic as her Energy Secretary to making no reference to climate in her first speech on energy policy, this is climate denial at its worst. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, does he agree that the development of the Rosebank oil field alongside Cambo and Jackdaw undermines both the Paris Agreement and the Glasgow Pact and will do nothing to reduce energy bills that people are currently facing?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I think if we look at the focus at the present moment on trying to tackle the cost of living crisis that many households are facing as a result of increasing energy costs, increasing extraction of oil and gas within the North Sea will not address that issue. That's not my view, that's the view of the UK Government. Kwasi Kwarteng, the former Energy Secretary of the UK Government, now the Chancellor of the Exchequer, made that point himself during the course of the debate in the House of Commons earlier this year. And that's why, if we are to try to tackle the underlying causes that are driving household energy bills and non-domestic energy bills at the present moment, the way in which to do that is to decarbonise our energy system and to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. And in doing that, we reduce our potential risk to the malign forces of people like Putin in the future. That's why renewable energy is the most effective way in which to do that, not only in delivering cheaper energy for domestic and non-domestic users, but also it delivers energy security, an approach which we can benefit from here in Scotland, specifically with an acceleration of renewable energy projects.
Mark Ruskell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response as well. Yesterday, the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, called on countries to tax the windfall profits of oil and gas companies to support people struggling with the cost crisis, but also to support communities who are suffering immense loss and damage from climate change around the world. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with his proposal?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Officer, at a time when households are facing such high energy bills, which is driving quite literally millions of households into fuel poverty and extreme fuel poverty, the focus is not only the need to make sure that we do everything we can to reduce the financial burden it has on them here and now, but also to prevent burdening households with increased fuel costs in the future. And that is the real risk of the approach that's been taken by the UK Government in the announcement they've made to date in tackling this cost of living crisis. The focus, I believe, should be on taxing the windfall profits of those particularly energy companies that are making sizable profits and using that money to offset the costs on households now. It's estimated that these companies will make in the region of £170 billion over the course of the next 2 years alone. That form of a windfall tax could be used to offset the costs of energy prices in people's homes today. And the UK Government should do that as opposed to burdening the additional costs onto household bills, which is what will happen in the future with the approach they've taken.
Fiona Hislop.
Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the UK Prime Minister should heed Alex Sharma, former UK-based Secretary of State and COP26 President, who stated climate and environmental security are now synonymous with energy and national security, and that Scotland's great asset of a combined energy sector means that sensible use of existing domestic oil and gas licences, subject to climate analysis during the energy transition and investment in renewable energy growth, including green hydrogen exports, will provide more energy security to ourselves and our European partners who desperately want green energy supply security from hostile actors than the UK Government agreeing 130 new but long-term licences without climate impact analysis.
Cabinet Secretary.
President Officer, I do agree with the President of COP26, Alex Sharma, because he also stated countries now understand the benefits of low-cost, homegrown renewables, the price of which cannot be manipulated from afar, recognising that renewable energy is the quickest, cheapest, most environmentally friendly approach you can have to tackling our energy crisis at the present moment while delivering energy security. And Scotland is rich with the natural assets to deliver that, not just for our own domestic needs here in Scotland, for the rest of the UK, but also to help to support the decarbonisation of energy across other parts of Europe, whether it be in onshore, offshore wind, CCUS, battery storage, whether it be hydroelectric, all of which can contribute to our energy transition. And Scotland has the natural benefits to maximise these resources. That's why it's absolutely critical that we see from the UK Government, it's early in this new Government's days, but we see an approach that is consistent with the need to drive forward renewable energy to help to reduce energy costs overall.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Mark Ruskell strangely forgot to mention Guterres also saying fossil fuels cannot be shut down overnight. A just transition means leaving no person or country behind. Without new investment in fields like Cambo and Jackdaw, and indeed political support from the Scottish Government, production will fall off a cliff, jeopardising the just transition and the 90,000 Scottish jobs that will deliver it, and makes us reliant on environmentally worse imports from regimes like Putin's. So, Cabinet Secretary, has this Government made an assessment of the financial, economic and environmental impacts of the Scottish Government's plans to abandon our oil and gas sector? And if so, will it be published?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, President Officer, let's try and deal with some of the facts, because we've been quite consistent in our approach, and that is that we should be transitioning away from our dependency on fossil fuels in order to reduce our risk of exposure to the malign forces such as Putin. An approach which is agreed by the UK Government. The failure of the UK Government is that they aren't actually driving forward the policies that will deliver on that as well. And that's the point that has been made here. They need to make sure that we ramp up our production of renewables and other forms of renewable resources, both on and offshore, in order to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. Our oil and gas sector, as I have consistently said in this chamber, and I think possibly even to the member, will continue to play an important part in our economy going forward. But at the same time, we need to ramp up our renewable developments, and that will help to reduce our costs overall. And what I think is wrong, what I think is seriously wrong, is the impression that some try to give that by simply extracting some more oil and gas, we can in some way reduce our energy costs. The reality is that will not happen. And that's the impression the UK Government have tried to give with the announcement over the course of the last few days. It simply will not work, because all the evidence demonstrates that it will not deliver the type of output that's needed to do that.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The approach by the UK Government and the Scottish Conservatives is indeed worrying and wrong-headed, but can I ask the Cabinet Secretary about what the Scottish Government can do to make sure that our planning system in Scotland is robust and fit for purpose? Because if we are going to see offshore oil and gas, new developments like Cambo and Jackdaw and Rosebank coming forward, what can we do to make sure that our planning system is robust? Because there will be a requirement for onshore assets and infrastructure. What can we do to frustrate the process if necessary?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, President Officer, most of the licences which are issued nowadays are tiebacks into existing oil and gas infrastructure that comes on to onshore. So new fields have been brought on, tying into existing infrastructure to come onshore. So by and large, there are no planning provisions in this for Scottish ministers and the Scottish Government to be involved in. The licensing of exploration licences and also for production licences solely rests with the UK Government. I believe they should be here in this Parliament. We should be deciding these policies here in this Parliament, given the importance they have to our natural environment and to our fuel security in the future. But as it largely stands, when it comes to oil and gas production, very often there are no planning requirements for Scottish ministers to be involved in the process.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions.